Hey everyone, Kevin here. The Federal Reserve today has issued an incredibly dire warning to the world, and this comes on the heels of Dr. Fauci's concerning testimony that we could essentially be 2 years away from a vaccine and be suffering repeated lockdowns. This has led to immense fear in the stock market today. It also comes on the heels of Boeing's CEO coming out and suggesting that could certain airline companies go bankrupt? Yes, they could. And this has also led me to issue an urgent warning to all of my course members in a private live stream that I just had at 9 a.m. this morning, where I talked about some large stock moves that I was making between companies like Delta, Carnival, the Simon Property Group, Tesla, Amazon, and some other moves and pricing targets, which I definitely encourage you to watch that live stream if you're a course member. Check it out. It's there, and if you join now, you'll also see it. But for now, what I really want to do is talk about the Federal Reserve, what we learned today, and I'm not only going to talk about Jerome Powell, I'm going to reference an interview with Federal Reserve President Neel Kashkari from a different Federal Reserve member bank, and we're going to get a lot of insights here that while they are very educational, also provide some cause for concern. Let's start with what Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell said. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell had a pre-issued or sort of scripted press statement today. It did not look like he took any questions. He simply gave his statement and walked away. And it was not a good one. In his statements this morning, he said, quote, "The coronavirus has left a devastating human and economic toll in its wake." Now, this is actually, while it's an opening salvo, extremely important. Because what is the Federal Reserve trying to prevent? Lasting damage. The Federal Reserve is trying to prevent scars to our economy that could essentially hamper us for the next 5 to 10 years. There's a reason the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond, Virginia came out and said, let's analyze what real estate's going to do over the next 5 years. And they felt that real estate could potentially decline 15% between today and 2025 in their worst case modeling, and then slowly begin a softened rebound. That is not the nicest kind of information we want, and clearly when we start connecting the dots here, the Federal Reserve is being very, very blunt to Congress at every single step of the way. Folks, we don't need stimulus. We need relief. That is, we need not stimulus checks to stimulate the economy. We need stimulus checks to give people relief from this disaster our country is feeling right now. There's a reason so many of us are frustrated that it's hard to get unemployment. It's frustrating to get unemployment. There's so much bickering and crap politics going on, and we can't even get factual news reporting. Which, if you haven't watched yet, I really encourage you watching my breakdown on the deep dive of the last stimulus proposal that was introduced and how I tore apart, some news reporting. And I'm not trying to take sides. It's extremely frustrating right now. Now, at the same time, I will say, I'm continuing to invest in the market, and we're going to keep going with the Fed's comments here in a moment, but I just want you to know that I am personally still investing money into the market. As I make money, as I make profits, I'm still putting money in. But we are going to be on a bumpy ride. Now, let's continue on with Fed Jerome Powell's remarks. He mentions that certain sectors of the economy have been shut down since March, and the burden has been left heavily on those least able to bear it. This right here is another signal that, yo, Congress, we need stimulus. In fact, he says that 40% of the people who have been laid off make less than $40,000 per year. And these are the folks who really started benefiting, maybe slightly, like a little bit, from the economic rebound we've had over the last 10 years. These are folks who started benefiting maybe in 2018, 19, and the beginning of 2020 because they started dabbling in stocks and real estate, and they sort of caught that end wind of the sort of bull run market that we had. Yet now, they're the ones getting slapped the most because they're most likely to lose their jobs. Yet another signal to Congress that, hello, what are y'all doing? Like, this is stupid. This extra $1,200 stimulus check? Stupid. That's basically what the Fed is saying here. With the Fed, just so you know, you have to read between the lines. And when you connect what Jerome Powell says with what the other Fed presidents say, with what press releases they release, like that Richmond, Virginia Fed release on the real estate market, then you actually get a clear picture as to what they think. And if you don't want to do that, that's okay. You could just subscribe to the channel and get life insurance and free stocks with Webull in the link below, and I'll continue providing this information to you. But let's continue on here because it gets uglier. Jerome Powell compares the scope and speed of this downturn to World War II. That is, if this has actually been or will be a significantly worse recession than we have ever seen since World War II. That's substantial, especially since after World War II, we had a post-war boom. But there might not be a post-corona boom as our consumer trends change and our behaviors change drastically. The fact that Twitter suggests that over half of their employees can now work from home, which changes the real estate landscape and encourages other competitive tech companies to also allow people to work from home, cuts airline travel substantially. Profitable business travel, gone for a very long time. This is not very good. Jerome Powell continues by saying, there is no economy-threatening bubble to pop. A lot of folks might disagree with that. Some folks will definitely say that there's definitely a bubble in the stock market or real estate market. But according to Fed Jerome Powell, there was no bubble. Instead, a virus caused this, which came out of nowhere, essentially. And there are 4 things that the Fed is doing. This is important. I'm just going to go through their 4 things quick, but watch what implication he makes after that. And then we're going to talk about Neel Kashkari, which that guy's brilliant, okay? Anyway. 4 areas that the Fed is working on. They're purchasing treasuries and mortgage-backed securities, basically to make the real estate market and lending market available. When companies need cash, they sell their bonds, and the Fed provides liquidity there. When real estate, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac need cash, they sell mortgage-backed securities. The Fed's providing liquidity there. That's good for the real estate market, okay? That's good for corporations. They lowered interest rates. Second thing they did. The third thing they did is they set up municipal bond funds to support state and local governments. We know that. It's kind of boring. And of course, they lowered reserve requirements at banks, which basically mean the buffers that banks had after the Great Recession, the Fed just said, don't worry about that buffer anymore. It's okay. We trust you. We got problems right now. Just go ahead and spend the money, please. Yeah, it's weird. And Jerome Powell even goes on to say that these are tools that are only used in, quote, extraordinary circumstances. And when this crisis is behind us, we will put those emergency tools away. That's also not a wonderful signal, because right now that means, okay, are things being kind of propped up? And then when the tools go away, are we like a house of cards that's going to fall? That's speculation. I don't know that I necessarily believe that. I think if I believed that 100%, I wouldn't be investing in the market. But I'm kind of like an always invest person. Maybe I'm crazy. I just figure, hey, you know what? Every time I get paid, I'm investing a little bit, even if it's freaking crazy out there. Anyway. Then he goes on to say, how quickly and sustainably will it be brought under control? Can new outbreaks be avoided as social distancing measures lapse? How long will it take for confidence to return and normal spending to resume? And what will the scope and timing be for new therapies, testing, or a vaccine? And this is where we know we're faced with a giant roulette wheel. Because when we have 8 to 10 different manufacturers working on a vaccine, we know that only one of them is going to succeed. And the one that succeeds and makes everybody else stop in their presses, is that vaccine going to be safe? Is it going to be effective? Heck, the market rallied on news of the remdesivir trials. That remdesivir, Gilead's drug, would treat the coronavirus. Yet all it did was reduce the death rate from 11.3% to about 8.5%. Congratulations, a 30% reduction in deaths. That's substantial. It certainly merits the FDA giving the Gilead drug remdesivir approval, emergency approval that is, to produce it and manufacture it and deliver it to hospitals, because any reduction in the death rate is great. But the problem is, for those who are substantially at risk of falling critically ill with this illness, they don't want to hear that, congratulations, your death rate has been reduced from 11.3% to 8.5%. That ain't good enough. For me to go out and spend and go travel on airlines and go on cruises, I'm gonna have to hear that the chance of me dying is at least under 1%, ideally 0. Once we have that, we can have confidence in the economy again, which Federal Reserve Chairman is clearly alluding to that we do not. In fact, we have no idea when we will have that confidence again, and instead we're going to suffer a substantial recession until we have that confidence again. In other words, the whole V-shaped recovery is dead. There is no V-shaped recovery. If anything, we might not even see the W-shaped recovery where prices fall and then they go back up and then they fall again on fears like today and then they go right back up again. That might not happen either. Instead, what we might have is what Neel Kashkari calls a ripple effect economy, where prices fall, we get a little bit of enthusiasm over Gilead, and then we get the fizzle. That kind of starts looking like an L-shaped recovery, which is also not very good. And what do all of these things point to? They point to the requirement for more relief from Congress. $1,200 extra round of stimulus checks, along with a whole host of like 1,750 extra pages beyond that relief check, is ridiculous. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand why Congress creates massive bills and puts stimulus checks inside of massive bills. They do that because it's so hard to pass a single bill. So if you're going to pass one bill, it may as well be a giant bill because that is the cluster that is Congress. But what we have to understand is when Jerome Powell goes on to say that avoidable household and business insolvencies can weigh on growth for years, what is he saying? Think about that. He said avoidable household and business insolvencies, aka bankruptcies, can weigh on growth for years. In other words, if Congress doesn't get off their ASS and do something to provide real relief to households and small businesses ASAP, like actually provide those $10,000 grants you promised for small businesses, or how about some real relief for individuals, then we will have, quote, long stretches of unemployment. Then he goes on to say, which can damage or end workers' careers as their skills lose value and professional networks dry up, leaving families in greater debt. In other words, Jerome Powell clearly here is saying, we can avoid these household bankruptcies. We can avoid business bankruptcies. Now is the time to spend. Now is the time to think big. Now is not the time for partisan bickering. He says, quote, the loss of thousands of small and medium-sized businesses across the country would destroy the life's work and family legacy of many business and community leaders and limit the strength of the recovery when it comes. In other words, when that recovery finally comes, if Congress doesn't act, we might literally see many of the thought leaders and community leaders and entrepreneurial leaders in our community without a business. Everybody's starting over, which for many that might sound great. But remember, as our society suffers as a whole, sure, the level field might get equalized a bit. But when the society suffers as a whole, don't kid yourself, everybody suffers. Again, a clear indication, a clear flag to, hello, Congress, can you please get off your ASS? Continues to suggest that the result could be an extended period of low productivity growth and stagnant incomes, which the last word anybody wants to hear from the Federal Reserve is stagnant, because people then think of, wait a minute, when you take off the crutches from the economy, are we going to see stagflation, where we have a stagnant economy and inflation, and then we have real issues? And so this is where Federal Reserve Chairman ends it essentially with a mic drop. But remember, it's the Fed, so you're not actually going to get a mic drop. He says additional fiscal support could be costly, but worth it if it helps avoid long-term economic damage and leaves us with a stronger recovery. But it's up to our elected officials. Look at that mic drop. This is the most dire warning I have ever seen to Congress. And when we combine this, what Neel Kashkari says, that look, we all went into this and thought that if we clamped down for a couple months, we would be able to reopen and the virus would be gone, we'll flatten the curve and everything will be good again. Yet now we're looking at his words, best hope for a vaccine is 18 months from now, and even then there's no guarantee that we'll have it 18 months from now, so we might be in this for a while. Neel Kashkari says the PPP floats businesses for a couple months, but if the business can't reopen for a year, what good does that do? Neel Kashkari, Fed president of a member bank of the Federal Reserve, goes on to say these losses are going to roll up from businesses who can't pay their leases anymore into the banking sector, who has to absorb these losses, who might not be able to pay their liabilities anymore, so it hits their balance sheets. It doesn't help that when a Federal Reserve president says, I was hopeful for a V-shaped recovery, but now we know it's going to be more gradual and muted. It'll be slow. It'll be an uneven crawling back of this economy until we have a vaccine. And we are a lending system. We cannot spend, only Congress can spend. Yet another slam on Congress to please get up and get to work. And listen to this blunt slam here. I'm just gonna read you this quote. Quote, I don't consider what the government has done stimulus. Stimulus, what we mean by that is if the economy is falling and there's not enough demand, you want to encourage people to spend. Spend to boost the economy. Right now, we're not actually trying to stimulate the economy. We're just trying to rescue businesses that are failing and people who are getting laid off, to give them enough money to make ends meet, to bridge this. Once we get through the healthcare crisis, there will be time for stimulus to boost it, to get it to where the recovery can be as fast as possible. I think there's nothing more than I can say here than we need to rally, to encourage Congress to get off their butts and provide real relief to the people who need it most. And that's not big corporations that need more bailouts as they spend years buying back their own stocks and many of them still providing dividends. Look, as an investor in stocks, it would be wonderful to see more bailouts protecting my stock investments. But that's not the right thing for society right now. The right thing for society right now is safety and security to make our ends meet, to be able to bridge this gap, to get through this. And we can worry about the consequences and paying off our debt to the world when we have a vaccine and our economy goes back to being the productive economy that it always has been. But all of this the third quarter is going to be a transition and next year is going to be great. That sounds wonderful. But right now it seems to be nothing more than smoke and mirrors. At least that's what the Federal Reserve is suggesting. I'm not taking political sides. I'm not trying to suggest that you should elect Biden or Trump. I don't care who you vote for. I have no interest in picking a side. But when the Federal Reserve Chairman says our government is not doing enough, and the consequences are going to be dire, and reports from the Fed reiterate exactly what they're saying and reiterate what I suggest they're saying between the lines, this is a bigger problem than we all thought. And so it looks like we're going to be spending a whole lot more time inside, which is the perfect opportunity to get life insurance to protect yourself, well, protect your family, and of course, learn how to invest in real estate below market value so you can protect yourself and learn about the psychology of money, because why not? You're hanging out at home, you may as well learn some functional and productive insights. Use that coupon code down below, get your stock with Webull, beautiful links down below. You could even see a wonderful vlog that Lauren made. I'll link that down below as well. I appreciate you all watching. If you like this sort of insight, make sure you subscribe, and thank you again. We'll see you soon.